Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Mysteries of Earth video chat for tonight, February the 3rd of 2023. Hope everyone is doing well today. Today we are going to be talking with Dave and talking about some of the origins, talking about new information, and talking about new perspectives. And what I will say with that is that the light of new information can be challenging. It can be scary at times, but it can also be very warming. It can be very calming. And so, as we work through the topics tonight and we learn together, I hope everyone keeps an open mind. And we will go through a number of topics, and then we will have a small Q&A at the end of the chat. So I welcome again everyone. And Dave, with that, how would you like to begin?
Well, everybody, first thing, um, we're all friends here, and what I'm going to tell you is what I've learned, and this is my opinion, but I can back my opinions up with documents and concepts that are easy to explain, easy to show. So I know this will probably aggravate a whole lot of people because it's a lot of history that has been occulted intentionally. Now, the first thing is I threw up on the chat page, the Mysteries of Earth chat. This is not a pipe. This is a very famous painting, and the concept of it is that you're looking at a picture of a pipe, a painting of a pipe, not the pipe itself. So it's substituting a metaphor for something that you actually can see or know yourself. Now, this is what exactly the concept that we run into when we get stuck in the communication metaphors. So when you take a look at the life of Friedrich Nietzsche, he died quite insane because he got stuck on the fact that everyone agreed to lie that a Tannenbaum, a Christmas tree, the word Christmas tree was the thing that we represent as a Christmas tree, the metaphor. And this actually drove him insane and caused his death. Now, that aspect of our humanity causes us to become tribal, causes us to become protective of a knowledge base that we've acquired. Now, anytime that you become protective of a knowledge base, you isolate yourself from any future knowledge. It's what's called a knowledge filtration system. Now, with that, I'm going to start out the big thing that's at issue, and the reason why I'm being so ginger about this is that um, I believe I am a Christian. I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins and rose again, and that through him I have dominion and authority and will live forever. Now, I do not believe that the current Bible as it sits today has the full context of the original Bible. I do not believe that the current copyrighted Bible is an unerring representation of the original texts. And I'll go into a little bit of that and why this is important in the flat earth aspect of it because of the Bible quotes that are there and some of the maps that were drawn during the 1602 to 1635 period. Now, the first thing I'm going to cover, I'll throw up a photo on the page so that you can see that this is something about the Vatican that most people don't know. The Vatican actually took um, land that was already set aside, that was already built out in the form of a lingam. Actually, not a lingam, but a yoni. And the land was actually the location of a prior uh, Hindu temple. Okay. Now, Vatica is a word in Hindu that is actually the root or the etymological root of Vatican. Now, the reason why this is important is in the third century, all of the texts of Christianity were in what is today Istanbul. And It was King Theodora who brought those texts back forward or back up to Rome. At that time, the cult of Mithra was the dominant cult in Rome, and a lot of the aspects of the rituals of Christianity came from the cult of Mithra. There's no doubt it predates it, and it's the exact same rituals that are performed in the Catholic Church. And from 800 on, also carried forward in the Protestant Church in the Reformation and on forward. Now, why this is important is that concepts of map making and things like that are actually descended from the belief that the Buddhists had, and the Hindus and Buddhists lived cooperatively and shared a lot of common um, belief systems. Now, I just posted a picture of Mount Maru. Mount Maru is the center of both Hindu and Buddhist teachings. This is the center of the entire universe. Now, maps drawn of this area is from that time period are actually circular. The, the the photo I just put up there shows Mount Maru in the center. I'm going to throw up a few more. Terravina. This is the map where the center of the Earth was moved to place Rome, the actual Vatican City, in the very center of the map. Older maps, I'm throwing them up here. This is Mount Maru. You have to click on that one to open it. Um, Later Roman maps, again showing the center of the Earth as Rome. Now, why this is important is the original story was a visionary tale that was explained as um, this great mountain in the center, which was today Tanzania, and it's Mount Maru. Now, I just posted a short video up on the channel, and you'll see in this video they show a flat Earth um, on the back of 4 elephants being carried by a giant sea turtle. And what's interesting about this is there's a lot of information that's in this artistic representation of what they believe the world was. Now, this was based off of a visionary written down, and then 400 years later, it was created into artwork. Now, what the guy actually said was that in the center of the world, there was a great mountain, and that great mountain was equidistant on all sides by a wall of ice. This world had a bubble over the top of it, and he used a word that's similar to nefesh, nifi, and it's literally means like a boundary, like a bubble or a soap bubble. He said it rests on the forces, the 4 great forces of nature. Well, 400 years before, the 4 great forces of nature were magnetism, electricity, gravity, and inertia. 400 years later, those were the 4 known types of elephants because the society had regressed to the point where the only natural forces they had, the great forces, were the work of elephants. Now, this artwork represents coastlines, everything accurately, because this vision actually carried the the perfect description of all of the coastlines. It also carried the perfect description of the circumnavigation of the Antarctic Circle. Now, in the Vedic cosmology, they have later they made actual mechanical models of gold that showed the movement of stars and everything around the single location in the center of Mount Maru. Now, that single location idea carried forward to the Roman era in that the center of the universe had to exist within the Vatican, and that was declared by the Pope. And at the time, Copernicus was actually able to measure arcs. Specifically, it was the regression of Mars, where Mars actually looks like it turns backwards and becomes closer to Venus, like it's moving backwards in its orbit. So the supposition at the time was that this was a giant clockwork because they had seen the Vedic clockworks showing the mechanized nature of this artwork, this original artwork. Now, coming forward from that, um, this idea of it swimming through the cosmos. Now, specifically, he said that it was swimming through the cosmos like a giant sea tortoise. He didn't actually say sea tortoise, but he said it was swimming like the giant animal. Now, if you take a look at the way the sea tortoise dives, it dives in a very specific spiral. It's the same spiral that we see in a bubble collapse or when you flush the toilet. Now, that inertial force that causes that is not from the jets of the toilet. It doesn't matter. You can do it with a glass of water. Whenever you pour water or you collapse a bubble, it'll form a torus. And that torus is the result of an inertia from movement. Now, when we take a pendulum, and I posted this earlier, so you have to scroll up a little bit on the chat page, there's a complex movement of the movement of the pendulum. And this is by Project JDM, and they're showing a 3D view and a top view. This video actually shows the motion of a single swing pendulum. And this is called isochronic motion or isochronic action. Now, in this, you can see the swing of the pendulum. If we were stationary, the inertial reaction of the pendulum would be for it to swing back and forth between 2 points, never rotating. It would not have any spiral to the rotation. The decay of the rotation would not be spiral shaped. Now, no matter how many angles that you use, and that's what that video covers, it covers all the possible angles of a pendulum swinging, it will always show isochronic motion. Sound, in decay of sound, shows isochronic motion. All of this is due to the fact that we're actually moving in a spiral. Um, if you think of planetary motion being rotating spirally around a center point, and that center point constantly moving around another center point, it forms what we actually perceive in the inertia of the movement of the Earth. Now, this is contrary to biblical teachings, and this was a situation where in the 16th century, I think it was 1602, the Pope said, as below, so above. In other words, it's called dogmatic progression. And the Pope actually pronounced this, and this, in 1537, I believe it was, is when they had started hunting heretics throughout the Roman Empire. And the church was the head of the Roman Empire. When that Pope gained power in 1602, he was a very corrupt Pope. And part of the thing with the Protestant Reformation was fighting against him, removing all the icons, removing all the influence of other religions from Christianity proper. Now, although 800 items were actually listed in Martin Luther's protest, not all of them were removed from the texts. And those follow forward, and they are cited. You can go into the Coptic Church, you can go into the Greek Orthodox or the Russian Orthodox. They didn't lose connectivity with Byzantium. They still were able to go what today is Istanbul and look at the Coptic Church texts. So where people get hung up is the Bible says there's a firmament. It says that they're stationary. It says all these things that during the Age of Enlightenment was used to basically make fun and call all of biblical teaching mythos. But these people had no freaking clue that the motion was a spiral. Still to this day, when they show motion of the earth and everything, they show it in a planar flat plate and everything's moving around in a flat plate. And that's not the case at all. Everything is moving in a spiral behind it, and you can measure that. Now, a lot of guys talk about, oh, the moon is a projection, or this, it's a plasma projection. Well, the surface of the moon isn't what NASA publicly claimed. There is a small atmosphere there, and we did put reflectors on it. And in 1979, Q102 in Philadelphia had an actual deal with Laserium, in which a bunch of us kids got up on the rooftops and at Laserium and were reflecting off from the lunar landing site reflector. Now, over a period of 28 days, that lunar landing site stayed stationary on the front face of the moon and moved its arc across the sky as a orbiting body would. Now, in 1993, we had a problem with the location of the Iridium constellation of satellites. Now, these are put into high Earth orbit. They're not outside the Van Allen belt. They're within the Van Allen belt. So if you want to call that a firmament, that's fine. But the simple thing was is that they weren't where they were supposed to be. So when we tried to beam narrow beam radio to them, they weren't there. So what we did was we did a gravitational map of the Earth. All of these satellites had inertial sensors that would measure gravity. And the gravitational map, when plotted out, these were all like depth soundings, if you want to think of it that way, like basically just pinging the Earth's gravity. And what we ended up with, I'm putting up on the site now, is a very lumpy, ugly-looking thing with a huge elevation on the North Pole, which corresponds with what the ancient text said and what some of the artwork with a mountain in the center. Now, the point that I'm making about all this is what they're telling us is a lie. But they've also constructed an entire second layer to catch people falling through. Now, this particular group of people who are in occupation of our government have fostered these ideas every time they've been in power. So you can go back and you can check when the dates of videos and the production qualities and everything of the concept of Atun, or A2N, however you want to pronounce it, that's the flat earth with on the back of the turtle, was fostered. And it was fostered as a way to associate people with the beliefs of the World War II Nazi Party. So this started back in the 1950s, and they actually scoured older documents and everything, and the religious documents and scientific people who were trying to test a bunch of things, and they bundled it together and put a bankroll behind it to push it forward. That's why you can still go on YouTube and see flat Earth videos. You can get flat Earth stuff on Twitter. All these censored platforms. This is something that's allowed to slip through, and acts as a catch-all. So I mentioned a movie that has a really good way to describe this. It's called Virtual Nightmare, in which they've created a lie, a virtual reality for people. And then they create this horrific post-apocalyptic, nuclear fallout everywhere, everybody's rotten as a fall through. And then they have another fall through that is the city, which people are in charge of everything. And where the truth is that the virtual reality was what everybody agreed on. It's what we created. And that is so true to what reality actually is. Reality exists by our intent to observe it. Now, God created the structure, the infinite probability. He also gave us dominion and free will. Now, to have a box you can't open, that's the test of God, right? Can God build a box he can't open? Well, yes, he can. Because he gave us the free will to change the probability curve to make anything in reality possible. All things are mutable. Now, as we observe things, and this is called the double slit experiment, if you observe photons going through a slit, they'll form a pattern like baseballs going, like particles going through a slit. If you look at it over time, you'll get a dispersion pattern like a wave going through a slit. So great minds in the past thought of wave particle duality and all this craziness. What it comes down to is every time we observe something, we collapse the probability field. So all the possible probabilities act like a giant, Mandelbrot set of the whole of universe sitting there available for us to decide what we're going to see. We as humans together act as the hand of God producing this reality. This is not all of the universe that God created. This is only the reality we perceive. Now, people who look at the flat earth and it rings true to them are actually perceiving that what they've been told or they've been taught has been untrue. And that's absolutely truth. You've been taught things that just do not function, they're not correct, and they never will be. But the goal at the time was to hold back information as a method of shepherding to create a circumstance where the common good would be compelled. Now, anyone who is actually good at heart doesn't need to be compelled to participate in a common good. And that's what I wanted to say about the flat earth. So, if Vigilance, if you can lead on some topical questions concerning what I've discussed there.
Absolutely. So the fall through element that you bring up there, I think is very important. And when we're looking at the reality, so I'll liken this to if anybody's ever broken a stick or broken a piece of metal or had to tear something, you got to go all the way to the one side and then all the way back to the other. And this is the exercise that is placed on the mind as we traverse the realm that we are within. Because we have the presented reality that is, for lack of a better expression, I'm just going to say mainstream, because I don't want to use any of the derogatory terms there. But the mainstream idea of the reality is what you are initially presented with. And then you navigate yourself through what I'll call awakening process, and you're given a secondary reality. So this is the first fall through. And how do I say? If you're running a business, you're running a military operation, you're running anything important to you, even like think about it as prepping. You have contingency levels. So we have mainstream truth. We then have our first fall through reality, which is what many people come to encounter is be it the flat earth, or there are very many topics in this category where we are shown that the reality is not truthful and that we need to be aware, aware. But the test in that matter is not to settle at that point, at the first fall through, because this is manufactured. This is the prepared, I don't want to call it an ambush, but I want to say that, oh, you don't believe this? You're going to believe this because it questions everything that you didn't believe before.
It's an
And the
acting
real
good
trick of,
shepherd.
yeah. And so the trick then becomes you get through the first reality, you get to the second reality, and it opens up your mind. And that really, I believe, even there are lessons. There's truth in everything. So you look at the Bible, you look at we have that second death. You have that rebirth phase where you are born again. Now, in the Bible, it's presented as you are born again within Christ. I will borrow that and say you have the first reality, you have the second reality, and from the second reality, you become born again when you start to conquer the duality of the two different perspectives provided to you, because they are provided, as Dave alluded to. And even The existence today of Telegram and the level of information that is easily available to the regular person can download and acquire this knowledge. Now, it's not all easy. It requires a lot of learning, a lot of unlearning, a lot of research and time, but it is available. And so we hear this theme being spoken about in many groups about disclosure. We are working our way through disclosure, but understand that it is controlled. And so, Dave, when you look at that, as you spoke to with the different fall throughs, you touched on that with that this is what's been presented, but it may not actually be what is reality.
Well, the big one that was just pushed out there hard among military industrial complex was in 1950. They took a look at how high we had revved up our industrial engines, and they looked at it and said, "Oh my God, we're at peace. What are we going to do?" Now we couldn't we couldn't consume sufficient amount of goods and services to maintain the level of production that we had hit as we're talking global society. And they leaned on a guy who won the Nobel Peace Prize, a guy named John Nash. He had this theory of the interaction of humans, that everyone looked out for their own best interest, that they were only cooperating or collaborating in mutual self interest. Now, it has to be said that John Nash is the guy, famous movie, Beautiful Mind. He was a paranoid schizophrenic who was hallucinating continuously, but he was a brilliant mathematician. Now, in his hallucination, he was unable to see empathy, he couldn't see cooperation, he couldn't see collaboration. So his concept of game theory, this is where game theory comes from, is normalized equilibrium, was that everyone is in competition with each other for their own self interest, and that we must have pathways to unify the population. Now, a think tank that was it's part of the founding of Mensa. It's got a lot of background to it, really rich history background. It's outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in an area by Sewickley, Pennsylvania. It's a place called Iron Mountain, and it's used as a repository today, but at the time it was used as a think tank and as a secure bunker. Now, there was a report published, what to do in the case of peace, and we've been walked through by our governments worldwide the phases that were recommended by this document, and I'm actually going to post a copy of it up there so you guys can review it later. Um, the next thing that the last thing that they did was snowball Earth, which turned into climate change, which turned into oil's running out, which turned into the current wackadoodles we have in occupation now, trying to curtail all human production and all human expression in order to really clamp down on the true nature of things, which is that we create. And as we create, we expand reality. And they cannot control an expanding reality. So they've fallen back on the teachings of Lenin, who said that artificial restriction or regulation was the only way to provide equity, that key word, equity, in distribution of the world's resources. So in Report from Iron Mountain, they give 6 options at the end of the report. The first one was continuous wars, and this was the spawning for the Korean War, the Vietnam War, many conflicts all over the world that the United States has started and been involved in. British, the NATO constructs, the UN going into different countries and destroying them. This has all been part of that first option. During Kennedy's time, he decided that he was going to shift the option to space exploration, which was option three. Now, in the group of options, we have a global um, pathogenic epidemic. We have um, a climate crisis. We have a alien invasion, and all of these things are ringing with what the paradigm has been created for us. Now, one of the fun things is the amount of debunking that has been put towards this actual document from 1958 and its accidental declassification, which is hilarious. It was accidentally declassified, and that's why it's available. And it's hilarious to see because um, those who tend not to be able to create have to manipulate. And this is one of the reasons why these constructs of control and shepherding are created. Now, um, people would be shocked to know, for instance, that in 1850, the people who got together to decide this are literally the same family lines that today are in control of all of the conflicts. They're on both sides. Um, Simple things like on the global warming swindle versus the inconvenient truth, both of those filmographers were from the same family. Roger Cotton Brown Sr. did Global Warming Swindle that was played on BBC4 at the same time that Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth was being played in the United States. And Joseph Cotton Brown Jr. is who filmed Inconvenient Truth. Now, this has been the structure of the control system. What they're actually hiding from us is something, if you guys have been following some of the stuff that was posted today, is something that's so profound. And um, I was trying to ease people into it by getting them used to the idea of there being structure to sound. And there was a woman, Sabrina, I guess she lost one of her family members. Uh, she worked for S3 as well. And S3 is Syncom Space Services. Now, this is something that was started in the 1960s. It was uh, a collaboration between NASA and two other companies to provide services for covert operations. And that could mean anything. It can literally be anything from, Maxwell smart shoes to space satellites. And part of that was is that she was made aware of the bio quantum field that I've discussed before, and that the ability to record signaling and transmit signaling to people who are unaware or unwilling to receive it is a high priority. Now, interesting part about that is that that aspect of reality is what they've shielded and what they've hidden. They've used all these different things to hide this basis, and that's including a lot of the historical reference that's in modern Christianity. Some of the fun ones, like people don't even catch it, and they can read it 100 times and never catch it. In Numbers, it talks about Lazarus and Martha being Lazarus's wife, but nobody connects the dots that that's the same Martha that's Mary's aunt. That's their family. See, and there's a perfect example. That was edited out because Mary, under Mithra, was born of a virgin and was ever virgin, so she could have no family. She could only have Joseph as a proxy husband, an elderly man who never had any children with her, and Jesus as a virgin. Now, this causes Christians to get upset. I do believe Mary was a virgin. The reason I believe Mary was a virgin was because an Egyptian midwife named Sarah used her pinky to determine whether or not she had a hymen. And those documents are in the church, but those are not given out to the public. So, just as an example of how to hide things, in our military, we're shown guns and bullets and bombs and everything that cost a whole shitload of money to do. Okay? Trump declassed 30 years of scientific study that people are just now starting to look at. We're 150 years beyond where the average person thinks is high tech. And an example, the SWIFT system, our currency system, that closed design in 1976 and was implemented in 1981. The space shuttle, right? And now we have the X-37B. The X-37B closed design in December of 1976. That's supposedly our state-of-the-art unmanned. We see SpaceX landing rockets on their tails. That design was from 1958. We see electronics. We talk about quantum computing. Quantum computing, yes. Oh, we're going to spend $20 billion and we're going to have something that gets the right answer 2 times out of 3. That's the truth. Now, nobody remembers the fact that we had optical computing. Nobody's aware of the fact that we have a material called metamaterial that changes its characteristics under electric fields. So we can use electric fields to program optical elements and use light directly as the data source. We don't have to convert to a digital computer. It's infinitely greater bandwidth, it's infinitely greater processor speed, and it hasn't become self-aware. There is no artificial intelligence that's self-aware. It's mimicry, and it always will be mimicry because those who create it do not have the ability to create a soul, the part of us that we actually have. Call it a living spirit, a soul, whatever your theosophical faith brings you to believe. We have a difference, and I postulate that that difference is that we have the ability to create. I don't see my cat creating anything. I don't see crows creating anything. I can watch a crow figure shit out, but he's not creating anything. He's living in his environment. We create our environment. And it's that act of creation that I believe is what gives us our free will and gives us our ability to win this war. And this is a war. Don't think that it's not. Go ahead, Vigilant.
Yep. And the ability to create, the ability, and something I saw as a team leader in past parts of my life, and something that anybody who has been a parent, a friend, most people I would feel have had an intimate connection where they've looked out for other people. We have the ability to create in our minds, so the raw resource of what we create with is comparable. The same sack of flesh or the same pound of brain that exists behind my eyes and within my skull exists within all of you and with everybody out there. And it is the ability to turn that matter and to turn that consciousness, the spirit, whatever you want to refer to it as, but to take that and to go out into the world and to create. And that's why I find that we have a lot of narratives going on right now that are talking about an external savior. I'll even say the idea of anon, people being anonymous, people, and I understand the reasons for it. But we have identities. We are people, we are souls, we are very creative, we are capable, and we're alive. So you have a lot that points at that remain anonymous, wait it out. Everything will be figured out. We'll see it happen, and that, to a degree, will occur because there are scripts moving through our reality that are going to happen regardless of our participation or not. But these are manufactured. they are not organic. Because I can say, even this evening, we are all real people with emotions, thoughts, ideas. We have fears and hopes, joys, dreams. And in the passion of creation, when people are being organic or sharing, I remember someone in the chat even earlier tonight was like, I'm not crazy. I said, no, no, none of us are. No one's really crazy, because this idea of, okay, well, this is the suggested reality, that is also creation. And that process I spoke to earlier, and then David spoken about, the one reality to another and arriving into the middle path and then moving forward, that is total creation, is taking from the left, and I'm not referring to any type of political left, but just from one side to the other, and then forging that path down the middle. And that path, as the creator, um, just as I create in my life, you all create in your lives. That is the song of the reality that we live within. And um, on the religious side, like example, the human spirit, it is within all of us. I look at that, and I look at frequency. I look at the spirit of human determination, the perseverance. And even now, when we sit in this reality, which suggests to us that it is crushingly miserable, there are people who are still sharing gardening tips, how to prepare a meal, how to prepare a tea, how to look after each other. So in the madness of the world, the human spirit, the human song, my song, your song, all of our songs, they continue, and they continue to sing, and they continue to play, because that is our role as creators. It is not the non-participation is not the path. It is to participate. It is to, and again, I do not suggest that everyone just suddenly becomes anonymous, because we still are within a world that has its challenges. But be who you are, because every act of kindness, every action you take, again, it's like you're in an orchestra. Every string you pull, every breath you take plays music out into this experience. And that is really the beauty of being a creator in this world.
Hey, Vigilance, let's take some questions from people. Anybody have anything they want to
Absolutely.
ask or comment they want to make?
All right, Raven, I'm going to turn you on here. Go ahead, please.
All right, hello. Are you able to hear me coming through all right?
5x5.
Yeah, vigilance. I really liked that last description you just gave. I actually recently got into writing up articles, and funny enough, I kind of just want to read this little paragraph here. It says, everything you do results in a vibration that emanates out and even influences your surroundings. Our every choice and every moment acts as a process of tuning our vessel, our instrument, and expressing our very being. Think of that empathetic ability we have to sense when someone around us is in a bad mood. You can tell by the subconscious influence being projected out from a person. Perhaps their shoulders posture is slouched, their head is tilted down and avoiding eye contact, a frown on their lips, tired eyes, a sunken tone. Our thoughts are like a mantra that follow us wherever we go. They influence our general perception, reflect in our decisions and actions. And as we personally develop ourselves, we can recognize our own experiences in the face of someone else. The same patterns we personally dealt with become obvious now that we are on the outside looking in. And then I go on to describe like feng shui and the idea of, I don't know, the vice versa relationship between your physical surroundings and your internal relationship with self, or kind of like how a soil and the environment determines the efficiency of growth of a plant. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was funny because I wrote that like 2 days ago, and then you just kind of
Synchronistic.
described the exact, yeah. So,
Man.
So
So no
earlier
question, but
today,
I just wanted to say that.
earlier today, I was posting some stuff on there uh, um, about the actual signals. We emanate light. We emanate a biophotonic um, energy signal. Scientists call this type of energy, it's an electromagnetic energy. It's called pi muon radiation. And we emit it. Our living tissue emits it. When we look at where the source of the light is coming from, it goes all the way down to our DNA. And we have these little things on the end of our DNA, they call them telomeres, and that they act as modulators, like little tuning forks. So if you think of an action like striking a tuning fork, and then it resonates, well, that's what creates that energy that's coming out of us. Now, this energy that's coming out of us has a specific shape. Now, these specific shapes are how our body communicates, and this is what Sabrina, I wish she was here. Sabrina was talking about the IEEE back as far back as the 1960s was studying this and actually plotted out and mapped the the existence of these signals and how these signals interact with our cells. Now, what's really cool about it is that, unbeknownst to the scientists figuring this stuff out, they came up with almost the exact same thing that's described in the beliefs of some religions have things called chakras. And the energy of the chakras was described. And you can take, it's like when you read a patent, you look at the object and you read what the description is, and it matches. So that aspect of it is so cool because here was science reinforcing something that was already known eons ago. And it carried forward in a religious tradition. Now, when we look at in the ecclesiastical tradition, we find that the churches had specific artwork, um, and specific in the windows and in the music that was played in the churches. Now, what's interesting is they both contain the actual shape of this pi muon radiation, this signal. So we're literally seeing that the church windows were depictions of what we can now see with a seismograph, which seismograph uses light and water, and the signal is amplified to photograph the light and water. We can actually now, through something called ultraspectral imaging, we can photograph humans generating these patterns. So we have the ability to literally look at the network between, let's say, your left foot and your brain as your brain tells you to move your left foot, or you tell your brain to move your left foot. We're seeing that signaling. Now we can measure those signals and we can reproduce those signals. This is what Sabrina was talking about with the remote control. Now, um, that aspect of the remote control was the idea of psychotronic warfare, and that was originated in the Soviet Union in the 1950s, around 1958, where they created devices. They didn't know exactly what they were amplifying, but they were amplifying certain people had um, abilities. All through the 1960s, there were two programs. One was run by former paperclip Nazi scientists called MK Ultra that attempted to force people into these abilities. The other sought out people with unusual abilities. The first one was Gondola, and in 1978, Gondola became Gondola Wish, and these were run by the CIA. They were run through Stanford Research Institute, and in 1971, a CIA project called Stargate was funded, and Colonel Jim Channon, who was a Vietnam War outrageous hero, um, came back to the United States, hung out around Santa Ana with a bunch of New Age hippie type people, and became a hippie. And a lot of the metaphors in the language of it carried with it his exposure to the hippie culture. Uh, kind of a weird thing, but they call them gurus and Jedi and all these things from Star Wars, and you read some of these documents, and it's hilarious because it's like like listening to old hippies talk. Now, at the same time, we had these guys, Rupert Sheldrake, Terrence McKenna, and Dennis McKenna, who I've talked to before. Dennis McKenna didn't take the drugs. He just wrote down what Terrence would tell him his experience was. So the McKenna brothers actually documented a concept of our reality, and this is really bizarre. I was talking to BA about this the other day. There are things that you can do that will bring your body into sync. When your body's in sync, the noise level of unwanted operation, the surroundings and everything, actually fades away, and you'll have a period of laser sharp emission. You become coherent. Your signaling of your body, this complex, like shapes of sound and light, actually becomes perfect, for lack of a better word. People call it ascension, they call it enlightenment, whatever. And what it does is it actually gives you the ability to sense things outside of your normal sensory perception. It also gives you a clarity that is absolutely incredible. Now, again, on the channel, I put up a couple of little parlor tricks. I went through what was called the Gateway Experience in 1971. And what the Gateway Experience does is it allows you to experience something called hyperconsciousness. And you can only be there for a couple of moments. It's more real than real. Now, some of the druggy guys, which I'm not a fan of using the drugs, because there are other aspects of being in this conscious state. It's beyond the veil. The Christian concept of a veil between the creation of God and what our reality is totally lifted. So any entities that are not in your best interest do not need permission to attach themselves or to harm you. And many priests over the years, most notably Malachi Martin, who was the archetype for the movie The Exorcist, Malachi said that this is dynamite for the soul, or nitroglycerin for the soul, I think is what he actually said. But very true. Couple things that you have to remember if you're going to do any of this stuff is that your redemption was paid for. Okay? You don't have to redeem yourself. You are worthy. And that's the biggest thing, is God created us worthy. Now, the biggest tool that, call it evil, call it demons, call it whatever you want to call it, the biggest tool that they use against you is your own self-doubt. When you hesitate or allow them to exercise dominion over you, you run the risk of having an attachment, a possession, illness, injury, everything else when you're in this realm. Now, psilocybin will bring you into this realm. DMT, crystalline DMT, which is synthetic, disconnects you. You'll experience a hyperconsciousness that is geometric, and it's not alive. Ayahuasca is really unique. Both ayahuasca and ibogaine, you experience the plants. The plant created this molecule, and in this molecule is the hyperspace or hyperconsciousness of the plant. So you partake in its hyperconsciousness. Now that aspect of it is like, they did the movie Avatar. There's a lot of scenes in Avatar where they're touching on the concept of ayahuasca and ibogaine, and of course the movie about Terrence McKenna. It's called Altered States. Also was a disclosure movie. So uh, these concepts I've shared with people about the idea of the gateway experience. The gateway experience actually syncs you up. Um, Bob Monroe from Monroe Institute and Joe McMoneagle and Ingo Swann and a bunch of other guys that were natural guys, naturally psychic guys, were able to actually write down systems to induce this conscious state. And HemiSync uses something called binaural input, which is you got one sound in one ear and one sound in the other ear, and it's the difference between the two sounds that creates the synchronization state, because your body and your brain will entrain to signals, and it will actually bring you into sync. And when you're in sync, um, it's more real than real. Uh, um, there is no uh, boundary of your knowledge. There is no boundary of your existence. Now, when you come back into reality, you don't get the withdrawal like you would, you know, after being flatlined. You come back from being flatlined and you're freaking hurt. It's just the way it is. Now, when you come out of this state, you retain a lot of the qualities and quantities of this state. So I posted a couple of quick videos where I was showing how I hide my scars. So I'm able to hide my scars at will. So I can also release and let those scars show. Now, I'm in end-stage kidney failure. I only have 27% kidney function, and my pH in my blood has reached 4.2, literally acidic. So I have a lot of neuropathy, and yet I stop the tremors at will. So I would be like a Parkinson's patient if I wasn't able to do that. I also project my physicality instead of accepting the physicality of my circumstance. And that's an aspect of this that's real world, here now, provable, measurable, but yet rejected. Um, One of the most frustrating things I experienced was I was using Cleveland Clinic back 2008 through I think 2012 or so, and they were using me as a teaching subject because I was survived not having kidneys, and it came a point where I guess one of the nurses became offended at the fact that I could do some things, and she went to her supervisors, the administration, and the administration said that my care was not to standard of care, and that the doctors must cease and desist and no longer continue on the pursuit of study. So at that point, I left the care of Cleveland Clinic. 3 days later, my insurance company canceled me, and I've been without insurance since. Now, I went from a extremely fit 270 pounds, massive amount of muscle on me. In 2017, I lost 84 pounds of muscle. I blew up to 315 pounds and then went down to 180 pounds. Now, since 2018, I've regained 3 pounds of muscle per month, and you guys have seen my pictures, I'm sure, on the thing. I do this by using these techniques that I've come to understand. Now, anybody can do this. We can create all of reality. If we get together, and I'm not talking woo-woo stuff, this is real deal. We can create an alternate, completely parallel system and an alternate reality for us to live in. And, our artists and everything have given us hints about this, like um, in the Star Trek franchise, towards the ends of the series, there was the Unimatrix 0000. In Avatar, there is the Tree of Voices. This idea that we can communicate, cooperate, and literally determine the outcome of our reality. And that's where I see us going. I think that's the great awakening that's coming.
Becoming your own musician, your own creator, and embracing that. Thank you, Raven. Did you have any follow up to that? All right. Thank you, Raven. And then next hand up, I believe, was Sherry. Sherry, you should be good to go now. Sherry? Okay. Any other questions in the field at this time?
Come on, guys. I promise I won't rant as much as I have.
All right. Psyche, you're on.
Go ahead, Psyche. You need to unmute your mic.
Oh, thank you. How did you know? Sorry, this is my first time doing this. When you guys were talking before about our ability to create and the how that goes with sound and shape, I think that is pretty interesting, especially on the heels of AI and this whole chat GPT everyone's kind of talking about, or at least I've seen people talking a lot about the differences. Why would it be better to not have, would we be better off to have, or is AI and chat GPT going to take over all of the jobs, and what are we going to use to differentiate ourselves? And it's how do they say, God made us in his or her in his image, and that image was the creator. And I worry about those. What do you guys think about the those incubators? Like, are we eventually going to be growing babies?
I think they're the people who are doing that, that are pursuing that avenue, comprehending what their belief system is. It is what think of them as tuned into a different channel, but along with that, genetically, they ain't us. They're actually bred with a subhuman, and that sounds like freaking horrifically racist or whatever. No, it's factual. Chromosome 6 on those people is not 5555. It's 5665. Okay, 6665. Sorry, 56665, and that is a natural trait of them. Now, in that, they also tend to be the least creative of any group of people on Earth, and I've actually bothered to track down what I believe happened and how they came about. Um, and I know this is contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, but I've been able to actually identify 4 separate groups of people that were here before us, before the Garden of Eden, if you have a religious context to it. Those 4 separate groups of people were wiped out in different instances. Now, one of those groups of people, called Alame, continued on until 1958, and they are genetically different than us. Um, some people liken them to a Sasquatch or a Yeti, or some of the what do they call those? Like extramorphs, or yeah, zoomorphic. Like what do they call those? Xenomorphic, unknown species type thing. But they actually had a body, and they exhumed a man who was his mother was one of these people, and his father was a regular human, and his body was exhumed 1958. That body's been in the laboratories in Russia for years, and they did gene testing back, I guess about 10 years ago is when they actually got around, like 2006, 2008, right in that period is when they did the genetic testing on his remains, and they don't match us. Okay, now the belief of this group of people that center around a city that today is in Ukraine called Alame, is that they are the descendants of Cain. Cain and Abel's story, Garden of Eden, and that their mythology is that Eve was bewitched or beguiled by a serpent in the Garden of Eden and was impregnated by that serpent. She then went and slept with Adam, and she gave birth to the twins, Cain and Abel. Now the problem is that when genetic testing is done, we have a common male ancestor in human genomics. It's around 100,000 generations ago, and we have an alpha male. We have 3 sources of alpha females, and 2 of those sources of alpha females share a commonality with the alpha male. One source of the alpha female does not. Now, you've heard about a RH factor. RH factor is often the 6th chromosome 6, Down syndrome, HER2, a lot of these disease vectors that would be typical in a hybrid carry through in population. Now, an aspect of this is that not all of them are bad. I'm not saying, oh, we need to go out and wipe these people out, but there are some of them who have taken on to themselves this idea that their patriarch is one of a group of aliens that came to Earth called the El, as in Elohim, and that one in particular, who was the most beautiful, Lucifer of the El, impregnated Eve, and that their god or their leader, more like think of it like a colonel or a general, Baal, is the rightful ruler of this planet. And this signal that they're tuned into, this idea that they all practice, is what guides them in their sociopathic tendency, in their psychopathy, in the methodologies that they use. And these are the people who are wishing to replace humankind. Now, the reason why they're wishing to replace humankind is that they believe that if they are able to force all humans to bow to their authority, that they have defeated the Creator. And that in defeating the Creator, they themselves become the Creator. And version 2.0 of humans is simple as just duplicating the function of a human. And that's where AI comes in. Now, little AI is something that we live with all the time. Everybody uses a hard drive, and we don't consider the fact that there's a tiny robot in there that determines where the data is stored on your hard drive. We use a dishwasher. The dishwasher is a type of robotic automation system that's an artificially intelligent system. These are little AIs. Big AIs, self-aware computers, do not exist. It just simply do not exist. Now, there was a gentleman who was extremely brilliant named Alan Turing, and Alan Turing was actually very much tuned into the wrong frequency, so to speak, and he became the authority on simulating humans. As far as creating the Turing test was, if you can be fooled, then it's human. In other words, so ChatGPT passes the Turing test, she can fool you into thinking that she's an actual woman, okay? But the simple fact is that she's not able to create offspring. She can create computer programs. She can't create offspring. She can't do the one thing that all women have the ability to do, and that's create life. She can't do that. So AI will always be a mimic. It can never be human. As women specifically have the ability to create life.
Doesn't that make you wonder if these people who have this sociopathic drive would be, not interested in allowing that to continue.
That's the reason for the 86 genders. That's literally the reason behind it. Now, in their mythos that they've created, they're supreme beings that ruled over the earth, the alien, you know, horde that came to Earth, were of nondescript genders. They had 6 different genders between man and women defined. Now, uh, in that you have all kind of crazed stories, like in Zep Tepi, which is the Egyptian tradition, the Kemet tradition. You have the story of Horus and Isis, and Horus being killed by Osiris, and Isis collecting the remains but couldn't find a penis. So she constructed one of stone and mounted it and impregnated herself with a stone penis. And this is very much relevant to what we're talking about, because if you look around the world, the pyre, the basically it's a lingam. In Hindu tradition, they have a male stone male member. Well, that's part of that um, belief system that these WEFers, the World Economic Forum is populated with a large group of them. Um, that's part of their belief system. So they think they can simulate through their cleverness or their manipulation the act of creation, and they're not. They're mimicking.
So how do you prevent yourself from getting sucked in, or how do you know if you have these people in your life? Could one of them be your mom or dad and you just don't know?
Can be, yeah, it can be. It's one of those difficult things. Now, um, a few years ago, my greatest lament was as I realized I was surviving to be a warrior, um, and that eventually it might come down to us having to be the hands that invoke the wrath of God. And I've been in combat, and it's very difficult to go home after you've had to fight in your neighborhood, and that aspect of that seemed to me to be more of a punishment for our tolerance and our unwillingness to constrain the evil. And I come to realize that what's set upon us recently with the self emulation that we're seeing, we see a large group of people um, basically killing themselves. And at this point, anybody who hasn't comprehended that there is a poison being delivered to them by the very people who have told them that they're going to be killing them, then it's kind of a God's grace thing where we're kind of getting left off the hook. And I don't think that in the next 10 years, the majority of the people who have aligned themselves with that signal will still be around. And I'm talking about the regular people, and it sucks. I got 2 family members that took the shot. I've, you know, I've talked, I've lost over 30 people close to me. 6 of them from myocarditis. Now, how the hell does that happen? That's a rare disease. So, but when I think about it, I'm actually able to justify or rectify it, understanding that these people would be led astray.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Psyche. Thank you so much. Sherry is back. Sherry, you are on. Just unmute your microphone.
Me? Yeah. Can you
Yep,
guys hear me? Okay. So,
we can hear you.
Dave, you're amazing. Been chatting with you. So, I agree with what you're saying, 100%. So, do you believe that there's going to be some kind of a Phoenix event? I don't know. I don't know how to say it actually as an event, but some kind of an awakening for a human consciousness, What do you know about that? Do you know anything about the Phoenix event and how it's going to change our consciousness? That is my question. Thank you.
Sure. Nice to hear you. Years ago, there was an army guy who it was Doctor Doom, his nickname. His name was Ed Dames, and uh, when he looked forward in time, he would get to a point where all you could see was a bright white flash. Now, uh, at the time, everybody just kind of assumed that this guy he's an eternal pessimist, right? Looking forward, we could see that there was an event, and we couldn't see beyond the event. And we did see a bright flash, but we didn't have the same thoughts of it being end of the world or end of universe type thing. He saw it as being a solar pulse or giant EMP or nuclear bomb, and it, that aspect of his personality actually blend over, and it was used as data. And a lot of the fear that's associated with this is coming from again, these same people are tuned into the wrong channel, so to speak. Um, they see, and we're calling it a singularity, and they thought that they were going to be the rulers after the singularity. Now, in recent times, I've seen that move up from 2030 to 2025, and then this year. And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, I think it more likely that because of the pressure that's being put on society right now, that our epigenetic response to that pressure, there's something called societal isostasis, where you put a negative pressure on, positive shit happens to overcome it. That isostatic pressure is actually causing an epigenetic change in mankind. Not all of mankind, but enough of mankind that if we were all to come into sync, all at the same time, the literal, and I'm talking literal light, like the biophotonic emission coming off from all of us, would be more brilliant than any source of light we've ever had. And I can see that awakening actually being the quote lifting of the veil and the second coming of Christ in religious tradition, in my religious tradition. I can see it as being the return of Shiva in the Shiva devotee, the Hindu Shiva devotee tradition and faith. I can see that being the return of Buddha, the return of the 12th Imam. In every one of these faiths, we have this common great leader coming back, avatar of God coming back to Earth to guide us into our new world. Now, if we were to sync up, I think that that would basically make us how could it trying to explain the concept, it would make us able to perceive or not able to comprehend. I think that's a little bit arrogant, but maybe able to um, bask in the glory of God. Does that make sense?
So, yes, it does. Thank you. Remember, I truly believe that we are children of our Creator, and that's truly powerful, right? Anyway, thank
One
you.
fun thing,
Thank you,
one
Dave.
fun thing that I
God
realized
bless
a while ago.
you. Mwah.
Yes, God bless you too. But one fun thing that I realized a while ago is that almost everyone here has had an instance, a circumstance where we say, God, get us through this one. We'll get through the next one ourselves. Or, God, I need to finish this. Please help me. We've all asked to be here. And I don't know if that's ever happened on Earth before. To me, it seems like we've had an easy life, and we have strife and everything, but I actually have this feeling that we've all asked to be here, and I think that's truly special in this time.
I agree. I agree 100%. Amen. Thank you, Dave. Thank you for answering my question. God
Oh, you're
bless.
welcome.
Mwah.
Thank you, Sherry. And yes, absolutely. We are all here. I often look at the messages that you see in the media. Like example, you see consent is pushed around right now, but attached to a very different topic. Um, we, the people here, the people on the channel right now, people listening, and the people who are awakening to the planet, we've all agreed to be here. And there are many interpretations on, did we agree before we got here? Did we have a conversation with the creator before we arrived? But we are here, and that is to something that we spoke about earlier tonight, that we need to participate. We need to reach out into the world and to shine that light to push back that darkness that we are so seemingly beset by. The unfortunate part for darkness is that I can walk outside my house into the pitch black right now and open up a match, and I can see probably for a couple meters. That ain't great for the darkness, because one little flame can do so much. But thank you. Thank you very much, Sherry. Diane, are you here? I've unmuted you. You should be able to unmute your mic. I am DMing everybody in between speakers just to let people know where they stand. So I am following that. But Diane, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
All right,
Well,
please
I'm
go.
here. You're there.
Hey, Diane.
Thank you. Hi, Dave. I have a question for you. Is there any relationship as far as a stroke and time slips are concerned that you know of?
Yeah, that's actually a mechanical part. Um, one thing that I found that was really cool was people who were in a coma. Uh, they can have large portions of their brain missing, and when you reach them in the coma, which you can do, this is reality. They're complete. Now, I'll tell you, she's passed away, but we had this friend, Suzette Ers. Suzette Ers had some type of a defect with the left hemisphere of her brain, and she had a hemispherectomy where half of her brain was removed, and she was fully functioning. Full. She had a little bit of a gait. That her walk was a little odd, not a limp, but like a hesitation in her walk. But other than that, she was 100% complete human. Now, she also talked to me about missing time. Um, and the best way I can describe it is our perception of time is based on our chronological um, order of our memory. Now, memory engrams form, and they form in multiple areas of the body. This is another part that's just recent, starting to be comprehended. We have a cellular memory. We have a a gut memory. Literally, they associate it with the heart, the tissues of the heart, and we have our cognitive memory, which is the part of our brains that, when they're damaged, you lose stuff, and when you lose stuff, you can have a gap in time. Now, your perception of day-to-day life can actually rely on that portion of your brain to put it into context. So if you think of it like you have extension cords and one of the extension cords is unplugged. Well, the period of time that your brain's looking to plug that extension cord back in is lost. Now, you can remap. Now, women who have had hysterectomies, and this is really a bizarre thing, but it's kind of cool. Uh, Women's ability to sense chemicals in their environment and in their food sources is part of the communication system that was created for fetuses to be able to inform the mother of its needs. And while the woman will eat something, she'll taste it, she'll smell it, but she also has a reaction in her endometrial tissue. Now, that reaction in the endometrial tissue reinforces the chemistry. So during pregnancy, you get these strange cravings where you may want dill pickles with ice cream, and it's not that you're actually wanting the dill pickle or the bowl of ice cream. It's that you're looking at the bioflavonoids because the chemical messengers from the placenta to the endometrium has actually messaged um, the body, and your mind sees that as a memory of, oh, I ate a pickle, and that was the chemical, and I ate ice cream, and that was the chemical. Well, I need those two chemicals, so you're craving those two chemicals. Now, when you have a hysterectomy, often women will complain that everything tastes like cardboard afterwards. And the cool part is that you can shock your palate, and this is something that I've been helping with. It started with the nurses at my doc's office. I see them every week, and they understand where I'm at on studying things. But they confided in me that since the number of people with the COVID injections, they were having menses issues, um, spotty, in a range of age from like 22 to I think she's 45, 50 maybe. But range of ages, and because they work in such close proximity, they were all synced up, and they were talking to me about the fact that they're having all these issues, and I looked into it and I actually studied it a little bit, and what I found was that um, their endometrial tissue was collecting um, not the entire spike protein, but fragments of the spike protein that were being shed from other people. And those peptides were accumulating in the endometrial tissue, causing um, spontaneous menses and irregular menses. So I talked with the doc about it, and I suggested that maybe they should do a rape kit, which is a silver nitrate. It's 1% silver nitrate, and the idea is that it causes an instant shedding of the endometrial tissue. Like you're having a heavy period, and um, then the people were fine. So these girls went from not being able to smell or taste anything, as menses issues and everything, and all of a sudden, after they had the treatment, they're fine, and they haven't had a recurrence, even though they've been exposed to. There's a lot of people in the Spanish community. My doc and office staff are all Spanish speaking, so the in that community, there's a lot of people who took the vaccine, and they're having all kind of problems. So in that instance, their ability to relearn the chemical signatures was there. Well, those are new pathways. Those are not existing pathways. So one of the tricks in culinary arts is what's called a palate cleanser. And there's a bunch of different ones, but one that works really well is deep fried lobster with trout roe and habanero pepper. And the combination of that will actually fire every taste bud and all of your olfactory senses at one time. So everything you eat after that tastes amazing, just absolutely amazing. So for memory, that's an absolute example of how new pathways can be created, even when they've been interrupted or the memory has been lost. So you can regain it, and both in Suzette's and with the women with the endometrial issues.
Thank you,
You
Dane.
want
Any follow up there?
oh,
Go ahead.
is it okay? I didn't know.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, I was just asking if you would follow up. Please go.
Dave, you once explained about RH negative also coming from a different line of Adam and Eve's, that they had more than Cain and Abel. You once typed it all out for me in Telegram, and I saved it. It's just I save a lot of things. So
Well,
would you touch on that, please?
sure.
As well?
There's this huge argument about this, um, and this is probably again going to piss off devout Catholics, but it seems as though Joseph had an older son. That's accepted. Joseph's older son was not named Thomas. His name is Tausus, and that's his name in the Greek Orthodox. And he's like a minor, not a saint, but like a revered person. There's the Gospel of Tausus, which is accepted in apocryphal texts, like adding to the story. Um, but there's also James Didymus, and what's interesting is Latin Didymus means twin, which is very interesting. Now, that can mean that he looked exactly like Jesus or that he was a twin of Jesus. Now, I personally believe that he just looked exactly like him. Now, in our tradition, Mary had two children after Jesus. One was James, and the other one was named Cyril. And the RH factor of the Merovingian line, which is the children of Mary, James and Cyril's children, and the Yesh, which is the children of Tausus. Tausus and James both had, through the family lines, they intermarried and all. But there are five family lines, and those five family lines claim royalty all over the place. That guy Greg Haley over in England is a distant cousin. I think he's full of. I think he's a little bit wacky. Um, if he had claim, he's like 14th or 15th in line. Okay. Now the RH factor, RH negative, means that you have no rhesus hemoglobin, that you're missing a protein. Now, um, that is actually a real deal. It doesn't come from a simian line or a lack of simian line or um, the influence of the Alame, or where it comes from is the family of Yesh. And that comes right through James, Cyril, and Tausus. And that was always considered a sign of royalty in Europe for 2,000 years. The first time that a different royal family claimed royalty was through Vlad Tepes, and Vlad Tepes was not royal, and that's the Habsburg line of families. Now, I happen to be Rh negative, O, with hemochromatosis. So when I bleed, my blood is almost black when it comes out. Turns to a bright fuchsia, like, almost a brilliant magenta color, because of the amount of iron in it. And that was always considered to be one of their tests. They call it blue blood or whatever. Now, we also have something similar to celiac disease, in which the blood doesn't carry enough iron, and that's also in the family line. That's also in a lot of the families in Italy, specifically Sicily, because of the practice of the Roman Catholic Church in the 4th and 5th century of intermarrying those families in the hope of producing the King of Rome. So hopefully that answered some of the question.
Thank you.
Yes,
Any
thank
follow
you.
up there, or are you good?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right,
Hey
next
guys,
we're going
don't
to
be
have.
shy. I don't get offended if people disagree or anything like that. So don't be shy about talking. That's why we're here.
All right, Kay, you are unmuted. You should just unmute your mic and you'll be able to speak.
Hi.
Hey
um,
KB,
Hi, how are you?
I'm okay. I've been in pain all week.
I'm sorry. I feel you. I feel you because I have a chronic disability myself, genetic disability, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Extra stretchy. I can fit myself in a box. I'm one of those, I guess you would say, like circus creatures. Um, I feel bad that you guys called on me because I'm so excited.
So what's on your mind?
I have so many questions. Obviously, just like the rest of the audience here, I'm sure some people are a little bit more timid. I've worked up my courage, and I apologize to everyone in advance. um, I just wanted to say, based off of previous statements here on this live, that if we have the ability to create reality, we really, truly need to caution against our fears, because I feel like that's what they're using against us mostly. Um, that's what we see.
Absolutely. Forbidden Planet. Remember that old movie? That
Yeah,
that was
we
the
we're
monsters from the id.
we're stuck in that cycle, and I just, there's so many people that you just, it's almost guttural. You want to grab a hold of them and smack them, like that fanatical woman in a movie that's freaking out, and like, come to your senses, because you're only making it worse for yourself, you know? Like, we have limited time. We know that when we enter this realm. Um, but even more so now, we're so aware of it, that getting into our fears, I mean, you couldn't do a more harmful thing to anybody, including yourself and those around you. So if you have any love for anything, let go of the fear, find a way to process it, digest it, and give it away into the ether.
That's like John F. Kennedy said, um, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And
Exactly.
when you, it speaks to the, when I was talking about people tuned into the wrong signal.
Mm-hmm.
If, we think of dichotomies, opposites or antonyms, um, when we think of God, we always think of pure love, literally love. When we think of the opposite of that, we think hate, but that's not correct. That's actually, uh, you can hate and have passion. Indifference has a greater ambivalence, or indifference is more antithetic to love. Fear would be an absolute antithesis to love. So if we let ourselves come into a fear state, we are literally dampening the force of life that keeps us alive. And you see it in the way that these the people who are so afraid, when you look in their eyes, they look soul sucked, and it's, yeah, I can't think of a better description of it. It's, the fear is so profound that nothing is going to break them out of that state. And I was talking with a lot of the social media influencers recently about this. Is that it's time to cut bait. We have to stop trying to cajole or to shake them or to convince them out of their fear state. And what we have to do is offer the brighter alternative. We have to actually start looking at things and building that world that we want to live in that doesn't have fear and evil in it. We need to do it now. Now, there's an old saying that comes out of Africa. It's, translated loosely into English is, "Do not reach into the mouth of a lion to save someone." So you don't go after the people who are already in the mouth of the lion. So, and that's freaking hardcore, and it's, I prayed heavy about this because when people were talking to me about the vaccine, what I know about it is freaking horrific, and it's literally soul crushing, you know. And
It's
when you
hard to
speak to
turn that
people,
off, Dave. It's
yeah,
really hard, especially when you can still make eye contact with the person in the lion's mouth.
well, my thing was is that I went through a small a small bit of anger and a little bit of regret, like a small period of regret. Now I just have the feeling of disappointment. Like whatever this person was bringing to the party,
Mm.
we surely will miss. So I'm kind of moving through the 4 stages of grief, so to speak. But I really do see the need for us. We will probably save more people by constructing a parallel system to what this fear and evil has constructed.
Okay.
And
On
that
those lines, before you venture off that thought, my thought to you, or my question to you, is I know you have grandchildren. I have two young children. My two children, one, the eldest is 9 years old and the youngest is 7. The eldest has autism. And I've been homeschooling for 3 years and we've hit a plateau. I've tried my best to guide my children both spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and knowledge wise. My daughter turns to me and says, Mommy, what about the planets? And I'm like, I have no bleeping clue. I can't say that to her. But I mean, my two questions, I guess, then in that respect are how best to protect or prepare our young, and what is the most, in your opinion, because this is opinion, what in your opinion is the most pressing thing that should definitely be taught to these young minds to help them cope with what is coming next? Because I think to myself, like, in the next 10 years, they're going to become fully capable of adulthood, hopefully. I pray, um, and that, you know, they have to make decisions on their own, and they're going to be a mouthpiece out in the world. I just, and my son being absolutely non-verbal, um, I don't even know what is autism. Like, what is this that we are going through with these young people? There's so many of them that are the spark that you can see that they're connected, and then there are other ones that are just kind of floating through. And I know they chose to be here, but I don't know how to guide them best. If you can offer any thoughts on that.
Well, on the kid who's has a spectrum, um, one of the things is that when people are in a fugue state, um, what happens is information becomes overwhelming to them. So
Mm.
um, one of the tricks, and this is just something that I learned about like 2 months ago. There are some guys that are actually having really, really good benefit. Just so happened the guy moved in down the street from me. Christopher Keys, the vaccine police guy, has a cohort with him, an older guy. He has this thing called a Magellan's chair. And I watched a young girl about 13, 14 years old come in totally shut down, completely, absolutely, full, like no spark, just robotic in her behavior. And 30 minutes in the chair, she comes out and she's wanting to give everybody a hug goodbye. Now, um, he explained it to me like this, is that what the chair does is it disorients them and disconnects them. And it disconnects them from that signal of our normal reality that becomes overwhelming for them. And it gives them a chance to reset. Now, I was amazed. I had not considered that before. I've known two autistic children in my life. One, I was Computer Dave, and he would only eat bacon, and then he ended up emerging in his. He was 13, 14 years old, and just one day he like came out of it, which was really bizarre. Um, the the other kid is still has problems. He's an adult now. Um, how to explain Josh? Josh is almost a savant in mathematics, but socially he's totally inept. And my wife and I have included him in the art community and included him in even in my businesses that I've had over the years. And it's helped him emerge a little bit. He's functional. He's, like I said, it's a spectrum. So he's functional, but when you get him into math, his focus is absolute. So I think maybe finding what your son is actually infatuated with and pursue it and see if it's a love. Now, allowing him to disconnect. This is something that, psychologists, I understand, will tell you don't do that or they'll never come back and all that. Think about it as being in the bottom of a well and all the water's pouring in on you. That's how they experience reality. Now, the other part of it is that and I'm not a psychologist. I'm not qualified to make any recommendation on this, but I would think that the gateway experience, or possibly even DMT, would help him break out of it. And it would be an interesting thing. Maybe do some research to see if anybody is actually doing anything in those lines. Might even want to call Monroe Institute. They might be looking into research on that or something like that. Now the daughter, teenage kids or preteen kids, their influence spectrum becomes isolated from the parent just because of the rebellious nature of teenage or preteens. Now, because of that, we found a very effective marketing campaign. We have a trademark on something called Girls Real Life Introduction to Skincare. It was a product line where the kids got to make their own body lotions, shampoos, soaps. They were like little kits that we sold through the mass market retail. And what it did was it empowered kids to actually not ask permission, but to think on their own grounds and not look for community validation for their own authority. And that's something that we need to instill in kids big, as soon as possible, every way we possibly can, to teach them not to ask for permission, not to
And
look
seeing
for.
the opposite, I've been telling my kids to ask for permission all this time because they're maniacs, Dave. Like if I had to tell you.
No, a better way to handle that, and I'm not giving parenting advice either, but
No, but I'll
at
take
the
it from you.
the preteen age, a cool thing you can do is say, look, this is the crap that needs to be done. This is what I expect from you. Sign this contract. You hold up this contract and you get a reward. Okay?
Ooh,
People say
yeah.
that's bribing a kid. But what it
No.
does is it empowers the kid to actually act within the confines of normal behavior and actually make their own decisions and not seek the permission. Can I do this? See, it's
It's
that aspect
choosing
of,
consequence.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
not the punishment end, but the reward end.
No, but positive consequence. That's what I've taught my
Yeah.
kids is that consequence can be negative or it can be positive.
Yep. But the whole idea is to actually, their school is telling them, you have to know this because this person over here said this. Their social media is telling them this is a popular opinion because everybody likes it. And maybe just telling a kid that, look, shit tastes like shit and 93 trillion flies are wrong. That popularity is not validity, you know?
Yes.
And that's a big thing, breakthrough. And even not just preteens, but 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds today. I am shocked. Yeah, I can honestly say that I don't think I've ever asked permission other than asking my father-in-law for permission to marry his daughter.
I think that it was the last live that you did when you said that shook my earth. That really, really did. And I just wrote down on my chalkboard a life without permission.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
it.
the kind of life that I think all of us should be, vying for within ourselves.
Just so
We
you
don't
guys
even
know,
realize we're doing it.
I am a total anarchist. A total anarchist. I'm not an Antifa. I'm not a Spanish, terrorist. No, I'm an anarchist. I don't need to be governed. I don't need to be forced to contribute to a common good. I own my own body. I own the fruits of my labors, and I choose who the hell I want to share them with.
Yeah.
I'm an anarchist. Now, I'll join a republic if the republic follows a set of rules that are conducive with my happiness, which the
I'm
United
down
States
with
was.
that.
Yeah, and
Dave for
that's what
president.
we have to instill. That's that independent anarchy. Yeah.
The other question that I mean, there's like 7 more here that I had scribbled down. I know that you've said before, from the imaging that was done, that our Earth looks very similar to a potato, which I love because I'm Irish.
I
I'm just
I
going to
put a
point that out, even though
blue and red picture
potatoes
up
are
in
not
the chat. Yeah, I put a blue and red picture up of it in the chat. That's the old
I heart
iridium.
that potato because I live there. What is it exactly? Like, is there, um, I know about, the DUMBs and all this kind of business. It's not in your estimation, from your experience and your knowledge, it's not hollow. There are caverns, we know this. There's these giant recesses where entire forests have grown and the trees are 30 feet tall all across the world, and it barely gets the light of day for an hour at a time. What is the Earth? Why can we not seem to wrap our heads around this? It's a toroidal
Well,
field, I'm assuming, based off of the
yeah, there is.
information I've seen.
Okay, so I'm going to throw some photos up on the chat because I actually had these from the other day, so I'll throw them up again. They're
Awesome.
right on my desktop, so give me a second here. So the first one I threw up there was the potato. Now, people talk about the toroid of the Earth. What you actually have is there in the center of the Earth, there is a small sun. It is a dark sun. It is a nuclear reaction where a type of cobalt is reducing to iron. And in that reaction, it throws off protons. It's a beta emissive, and those protons travel up through the superheated plasma state of the corona around there, which is basically like different types of rock where the neutrons and protons have been completely stripped from the atom, and just the goo is there, the plasma state is there. Then we have a carbon layer, and then we have mantle that forms on top of that. Now, the magnetosphere is actually semi-toroidal, and let me launch that. I almost forgot to send it. I got a good picture of it here. It's a pretty good drawing diagram. Now, there's a device called a magnetometer that actually measures magnetic flux. And what they've done is they've taken magnetometers and they've put them in all the satellites. Now, again, this is another one that'll digress into the moon landing part. But when you actually look at this picture, you'll see that because the whole solar system is moving through the galactic space towards the center of the galaxy, the Earth is rotating in a spiral behind the sun moving, and the sunlight and the emission from the sun is actually pushing the magnetosphere backwards, so that we have a very thick layer behind it that extends out for miles and miles. Well, uh, miles is such a small measurement compared to what we're talking about. Just huge amount of distance. Now, tighter and tighter in, we have greater and greater flux lines of magnetic force. Then we have eddy currents and everything else. So what ends up happening is we have the atmosphere, the ionosphere, which has an electrical charge, and the mesosphere will take on the characteristic of that outer magnetosphere. So we have an actual donut shape where the thinnest parts are at the poles, at the magnetic north and magnetic south poles. Now, the magnetic south pole is larger in diameter. The magnetic north pole tends to be a very narrow, about 8 mile wide area. And interesting thing is, in the past, the distance from the point of rotation to the magnetic pole has decreased. So the resulting magnetic flux, the electrical signal that goes through everybody on Earth, has been reducing from 1900 to 2023. We're at the lowest point that it's been in a long time. Now, yeah, that's just a cool side effect. Now, the part about the Apollo landing is when they send spacecraft up through what's known as the Van Allen belts, which are belts of particles that surround the Earth. The distance from the Earth to those belts varies along with the magnetosphere. So we're able to launch into high orbit above the Van Allen belts because of they call it solar wind. That's a bad description of it. It's because of the pressure created to distort that magnetic field. So we actually only needed very thin gold foil, like space blankets, to actually shield from the electromagnetic
It's crazy. That was
discharge.
one of my biggest questions because of the fact that that was like a major hint in the story of, the Apollo space mission for me
Yeah.
is,
Well,
how
what's
that was
fun?
in the Millennium belts and the radiation and everything, and they kind of just blew it off. I guess we went through it. I don't know. I wasn't
Yeah.
affected, and
Well, if you remember, the astronauts all died of cancer too. So
yes,
it,
that's
it wasn't like a minor deal. It was like taking 10,000 chest X-rays. But
yeah.
but no, it was definitely possible. Now, the contrary to that is that at the South Pole, because of the flux lines, there's an area near the South Pole, the magnetic South Pole,
Mhm.
that is extremely dangerous. When they flew instrument packages over it in high altitude balloons, and then in basically a little more than kites. I mean, they were like box kites, big box kites that were towed with a truck, to get them up in the air.
Mhm.
That stuff, those instrument packages, became so highly radioactive that they put a moratorium on flying over the magnetic South Pole. Now, at high altitude, satellites routinely pass over and image it, no problem. Now, at low altitude, it will cook you. And proof in the pudding of that, if anybody lives near DC or is up in DC, go to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, where the Enola Gay is displayed. On the floor underneath that is a section on the Norton bomb site and on the Project High Jump. The Norton bomb site is to the left, Project High Jump is to the right. They have foot thick lead crystal glass shielding the package. It's still like incredibly radioactive, and it's been more than 50 years, and it's always going to be radioactive, and that's because it passed through that unshielded section of the Earth's magnetosphere.
Okay. After having completed that, I legit have, I promised, just 3 more things that I wanted to touch on with you.
Oh, go right ahead.
Golden blood. Go.
Say that again. Sorry.
Golden blood.
Well, I've heard of cupric sulfate blood. Never golden blood.
So apparently, and I'm a Tory listener, I should state that. It's like disclosure of mine. She has some kind of speciality to her blood that she has not disclosed in full. Um, what I did find out in a conversation with my own mother was that when my grandmother went in for diverticulitis surgery, that the University of Penn was so very interested in her blood, they were trying to throw agreements at her to get her to sign over samples and offer her hundreds of dollars, which it was probably worth more than like hundreds of thousands. But I was curious if you had any knowledge that it's basically like an all healing blood, like it can be accepted by all, and that it heals, but there's very few people in this world that have whatever the properties are that is contained within this blood. I'm not really sure what it is. My mom
That
didn't
would
keep
make sense. The
records.
expression "golden blood" probably comes from the money they used to pay for. Um,
Yeah.
uh, O negative blood can be used. Um, the plasma can be used to treat anybody. It doesn't
Yes.
have an Rh factor protein antigen, so you can use it on AB positive, AB negative, A positive, negative, B positive, negative. Now, the other thing is that the immune system is slightly different. Um, um, it's a lot more aggressive. So, for instance, um, when you have like I have hemochromatosis, which just means a whole shitload of iron in my blood. The
Yes,
serum
I've
part
been
of my
tested for that myself, actually.
yeah, the serum part of my blood, um, I have all kind of crazy antibodies because of all the crap that I did in my life. So I used to give blood at $90 a pint is what they used to pay us. So I can say that's probably what she was talking about with golden blood is that they're interested as a serum donor. So maybe that's the issue.
Yeah, it was something having to do with the proteins, that she didn't have any proteins reactivity. Like it was like it was she healed exceptionally fast, which I wish I had inherited that. So I'll cross that one off my list that I asked Dave. Um, Another question that I had for you that I feel that your answer would be highly informative, not only to myself but others. Information stored in crystal form, historically and possibly in the future. What is your take on that?
Sorry about that. I lost my mouse.
You thought it was
I'm
me?
like, where's my mouse? I'm scrolling all over the place. Okay, so yeah, I started laughing right away, and that's why I screwed up on the mouse. But okay, so in the 1970s, before digital computing became popular, um, there were a couple things. One was called an interferometer. There was a scintillator, a multiplier. I'm turning the AC on. Sorry if it's too loud, but it's getting hot in the room here.
Florida
The
people.
so the the deal is that are you guys familiar with a pinhole camera?
Yes.
Okay, so a pinhole camera at the aperture of the pinhole camera, all light that would be projected onto the image passes through at that point. Now, when you take a holographic image, you're exposing a gelatin to the differential between a laser beam and an image of light reflected off from something, and that causes the gel to congeal. Now, each point, if you think of like a pixel, everybody knows about megapixels or whatever, as the little parts of the image. In the
Mm.
case of a hologram, each point of image contains the whole image. Now, where a photograph on film has the hue, saturation, and luminance of the light source, a hologram also has the phase angle and the time domain. Now, those five elements are stored on the smallest point exposed in the hologram
Right. I
of the entire
remember
image.
the experiment with ice.
Yeah. So that
Fascinated by it, but I'm thinking more along the lines of like actual crystals storing energy similar to
yes,
the way
yes,
that our
yes. No,
instruments
this is
do.
what
So
I'm
it's the
describing.
same?
So um, I did a job up at a place. It's a company called S3 that's up at Groom Lake. It's by the radar installation. we photographed, not photographed, but holographed an F-18E aircraft that had new equipment on it. And that photograph or holograph was literally the size of a grain of sand. I think really fine beach sand. A silica crystal that size. And it contained all the information of a 360 degree view, 720 actually, a spherical view of the aircraft. Now that's used in an optical comparator in what's called the friend or foe system. So that single crystal contains all the visual information and the infrared and the microwave reflectivity of the object that was imaged. Now,
Superman.
so
The cave of crystals, right?
the information stored in crystals. So there's another thing that I actually posted some stuff. I'll have to find it. I can put that up there actually. That's still on my desktop. So these are declassified patents, and these are on the aspects of optical computing. And the first one is on the optical comparator. And before digital measurement, we used optical comparators in all the different machine shops around the country. That's how we were able to do extremely accurate measurements. The optical comparator on the Norton bomb site identified bomb targets as an example of another use of it. So let's see here. The time phase correction. This is using metamaterials to actually change the time domain of an image. So yeah, we can go backwards, forward in time. We're also able to remove the ability for a material to reflect light, therefore it becomes invisible. Cloaking, literal cloaking, and this is all crystalline technology. And the fourth item I put up there is a document on meta optics, and this is the ability to program optical computing devices using terahertz beams to deform the metamaterial. In other words, we're able to actually change the optical quality real time. Now, that was the big drawback on optical computing, was that you couldn't have an app for that. You had to have a computer built to do a specific purpose, and only that. Now, with the emergence of metamaterials and the ability to create materials that have different optical properties under different fields, we're able to actually...
Myopia.
Yeah, like myopia. Yeah, that's an example. That would be convex collimation. And
Yeah,
then you
because you
have...
just have to electronically or electrically charge it, and you can change its
Yep.
entire calibration.
changes the optical property, and that change you can program. See, now the refinement of that is so
When
fine.
can we use this stuff, though? Like,
We
when
did,
can
but people
some
no in
person
90.
sitting in Pennsylvania in Delaware County?
Okay,
when
do
can
you
I
remember?
use it?
Remember those old cheap pagers that they were
Yeah.
$100? They had the red LED on the end of them.
Yep.
Okay, because NVRAM was so expensive, at Motorola we used folded optical path memory in those.
Jesus.
It was light-based memory in those pagers, and that was 1993, 95.
Yes, they snuck that in there.
Yeah, well, it wasn't sneaking it in there. It was the cheapest shit we could use on that pager.
But we
See,
didn't
and
know.
this,
What I'm saying is, like, common people like me, like, the plebes, we didn't know what it was.
right? Yeah, and it actually said it on the box. That was the other thing that was so hilarious.
Now
We
I
had
feel
some
really dumb.
in electronics. There's another component that was invented back in the 1950s. It was invented by the guys at HP. It's called a memsistor, and it acts as a resistor with different resistance value depending on what the charge is that's placed across it. So it can be used in place of a hard drive, place of silicon for a hard drive. Now, the problem is that manufacturing something in high density was a big issue. So in 2014, I was working with a gentleman from China who actually manufactures a material called Ebonex or titanium. It's a Ti407. Now, Ti407 junctions can be laser bonded and allow you to create memsistors at the same density as hard drive material. And you know, we couldn't find a damn person on earth to buy the shit. We perfected the device and no customers.
We'll catch up.
It's because the
150
population
years
has
in
been
advance.
pushed.
We don't
It,
understand what's even out there. So
right.
having a customer would infer that you understood in full what the technology actually does.
Well, part of it is that I even invented a motor that just a simple. It's an expansion motor like an internal combustion engine. It runs on the expansion of argon under electrical charge when heated by sunlight. Okay, it produces 184 foot-pounds of torque at 800 RPM, which is about 25 kilowatts, off from a temperature differential of 80 degrees input to output. The mirror necessary to collect enough energy, not just sunlight, but the thermal, not just the light portion, but the thermal as well, is only 240 square feet. That's
I'm just
25
going to refer
kilowatt.
to you as Doc from now on. Like, I'm just fascinated by
Yeah, I did that.
the
I presented
ability
to
that you've
Gross
had
on
to
something
take the
else and I
knowledge.
didn't get it. I
Yeah.
tried getting my doctorate, but they refused to accept my dissertation. You know who Gross
All
is
right,
in
last
Austria?
question.
Yeah.
I know who he is. He's one of them.
So go ahead. What was that?
The last question I had for you is, what is CERN and what is it doing?
Okay. Stated purpose to explore the fabric of the universe. Evident from their pursuits is one was to disprove a concept in alchemy known as the philosopher's stone, or in popular vernacular, the Higgs boson, was to actually destroy the particle that is God, that would enable them to control all of creation. Now, in atomism, I can't say it. I just said it, and now I can't say it. In atomism, this is a philosophical idea that the universe is made of one piece of matter, one single particle that is everywhere at every time. And by capturing and destroying it, you can destroy all of God's creation, making you more powerful than God. This was alchemy, 15th century. Now, interesting thing is the location of CERN is over an area, it's a Greek temple called the Apollyon. Now, the other name for the Apollyon is Abyssis. And the fallen angels that were cast into the abyss, Abyssis, are supposedly there, and legend has it as the 13th gate. That is the location of the Apollyon, the temple to Apollo. Now, in Egyptian, that was Osiris, the morning star. In Latin, Apollo was known as the light bringer, Lucifer. Oh yeah, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I studied, what was it, world mythology when I was in college. Not for any kind of, I mean, it was a credit course, but it wasn't for my major. But it was my life's work at that point. Because I
But the
realized
biggest
that
thing,
they all were speaking the same
oh yeah, well
exact story.
they have a dancing what is that? Not Shiva, but is it Dan?
No, it's
Mimi, can you
Shiva.
pipe in here? Who's that at CERN? Which goddess is that?
The goddess of destruction, Shiva.
It is Shiva. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I
12
thought it was
Shiva.
Kali
So
was destruction.
creation
It's
and
Shiva.
destruction.
Okay.
So it's like if you want to go back to the toroid idea, it's the same
Yeah.
thing. It feeds and feasts on itself.
So, it in my honest opinion, I think I look at things as being a lot more mundane because these people are inept. Okay, they're really truly inept. And when you sit down and you have lunch or talk with these people, it's like holy crap,
Yeah,
they're
no,
getting
thank
money.
you.
So, more than anything, I think it is a big ripoff and money channel for academia. And when you look at the billions and billions and billions, we had linear accelerators back in the 70s and 80s that had more capacity than that toroidal accelerator had. The Tomakin at University of Pennsylvania, Penn State University, Berkeley campus up in north of Newcastle, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
That reactor had as much force as their 26-mile ring linear loop reactor that they had.
I was just having this conversation with someone this week about the fact that they brought up CERN, and I said there's so many reactors that are all across the United States that people are not even aware of that have the same, capacity to do things, if not better, and with less publicity. And so we're not watching them, and without what's the story you were talking about, the slit camera? If you
what was that?
The slit camera, like if from
that's the
if you don't observe something,
wave particle duality theory. Yeah.
Exactly. If you don't observe something, then it's not locked in place. And so we all need
right.
to
It's
observe.
in the uncertain state. That's Schrodinger's theorem, the Schrodinger's postulate.
That's where those people reside because they don't have creativity. They sit in the uncertainty. And what we need to do is observe them, lock them into place, and then destroy them.
Well, no, you just make them irrelevant. You don't have to put force against them. They're self-destructive. Just make them irrelevant. That's what I'm saying. Parallel them. Go around them. And I looked at CERN and I was interested in the mechanisms of CERN. You know, the technology there. And the one that actually really pissed me off, okay, I qualified for an electrophysics, okay, a doctorate in electrophysics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I comprehend completely their theories. Now,
I know.
What really gets me is that there was a guy named Enrique Fermi who came up with a statistical model and a placekeeper. So when you're working the formulas and you end up with inequalities, you can put a fermion into that inequality to finish the calculation.
Yes.
Well, they came out and announced that they had discovered the Higgs boson by tracking two fermions, one at 13 million electron volts, and one at 14 million electron volts, 14.7 million electron volts. That's total freaking statistical nonsense. Literally said, okay, so we got this thing, and our statistics said that we're missing these two elements, and we didn't detect them, so we're saying that we found it. And it's like, holy crap.
Big question marks, big gaps in their theory, big gaps in their equations.
Yeah,
and
the people around the world all applauded. Yay! I feel like I'm in freaking Mike Judge's Idiocracy.
I was with you on that.
And I'm sorry, that's really condescending, but that's.
But it's true.
You know, I joke around that I grew up seeing the Jetsons and being part of the Jetsons, and I live in the Flintstones. You know, it's really amazing, and it actually isn't even the WEF. It's not even those people that are causing it. We are at a state in our society now that when Akhenaten started worshiping a single god in Egypt, okay, I forget what that was called, the Atun. Okay.
Yeah.
And the rising sun was the Aten. Um, all of the priest class of Egypt contained all of the scientific knowledge of Egypt and revolted against Akhenaten because they would not get their stipend. Well, we have the exact same situation with knowledge in this world right now, where we have this priestly class that call themselves academics that are practicing a religion called scientism, and you have self-appointed I am science like Fauci, right?
Yep.
And the average person is, and the stuff is right there in front of them. They can tell me more about the shape of some celebrity's ass than they can tell me about, what's in water
And that's
that they
something
drink
that I
every day.
find fascinating because they find their validation through these
Popularity.
well, it's not just popularity. You can call it popularity, yes, but it's the scientific academia patting them on the back, and it's just this, if you will, Ouroboros, like snake eating its
Oh
tail.
yeah.
It's more and
Well,
more and more contaminated with nothingness.
so
There's no substance to any of it.
my company, Graphite Blue Industries, we generated 200 unique products. Okay, that every one of the products was considered fringe science. Okay.
It was amaze balls, by the way. I looked through that.
We have literally a cavitation heater. This is something that makes steam. Okay.
Yes.
It has a 180 watt motor on this thing, and it causes a noise inside of it that generates steam. The output of it is 4,500 watts of steam. Well, everybody, that's over unity. That's perpetual motion. You can't sell that. It's like, wait a second, it makes steam, and it's more efficient than what you got. Obviously, your theories are wrong. Got another thing that the motor I spoke about that runs on sunshine.
Yep.
Okay, it has a higher conversion factor than the Carnot number. That's why it was rejected. Hell, we made batteries that use the decay of strontium-90, the size of a cell phone. They produce 3 kilowatts continuous for 28.8 years. They drop down to 1.5 kilowatts in the next 7 months, and they produce 1.5 kilowatts for 28.8 years. The packaging, everything's completely inert, safe. You can't burn them, break them, open them in any way. And yet that was rejected.
How dare you think outside of the box, Mr. Dave?
Right. I'm going to post
Yeah.
my motor running on sunshine up on the chat
Yeah,
so people can see it.
There's a song about it.
Yeah. No, that's I got it set to the soundtrack. Okay, let's let some other people talk now. If I saw a couple hands up there. Huh?
Yeah. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
we'll chat more later.
Thank you, KB. All right, Nimi, you are up.
Hi, Dave. A couple questions.
Hey, how you doing, Amy?
Hey. Okay, so a couple questions. By the way, that was Shiva. Shiva has many forms.
Yeah, the many arms. I
Nataraja
just
is,
couldn't remember if it was Shiva or not. I didn't want to be
no, I get
disrespectful.
it. And there is a form of Shiva which is a half man, half woman. They call it Ardhanarishwara. So it's like that's an interesting form of Shiva too. So anyway, different manifestations, same energy type of thing, right? So, okay. So question, and no offense to anybody who's religious. My question is, I'm trying to understand this better, is that if we come with our own karma and we create our own karma and then we have to live through the consequences of our karma, then why do Christians say that Jesus died for our sins? How do you know for sure that that that's a true fact?
It's not a karmic thing. We still have to face judgment for our behavior, and that's we call it Judgment Day in Christianity, in which we will bend our knee and bow our head before God to be judged. And our worthiness in the middle plateau is what I was speaking about, not our reward in heaven or our damnation to eternal torture, okay? But our ability in the middle plateau to have dominion over the entities of that plateau. And this was the part of Christianity that was guaranteed to us, because the original, and this is getting into actually, this is part of that hidden occult part of the Khazarian belief, the Christian belief, and part of Hinduism as well. Now, Garuda, who was famous for killing demons, okay, Garuda is a good example of what we consider the Christ consciousness, the actions of Christ, what Christ did. Garuda protected his people, his followers, his believers by killing off the demons who would attack them. Okay, and that's a good example in Hinduism of a concept of Christianity. Now, in believing that we are redeemed, and this is the gist of it right here. The concept that we have authority and dominion because we have been forgiven by this man who was an avatar of God. Okay, he's recognized as a prophet, and a prophet is an avatar of God, just like any of the other gurus or holy men of India can be recognized as an avatar of God. Now, so there is a parallelism there with the faiths, and our belief in that his love for us, for his followers, was so great that he laid down his life so that we would not have to, is what gives us our dominion and our self-assurance. And that's very important, our self-assurance of that dominion against those entities that are not acting in the interest of God. And it doesn't give us the right to, be assholes. We still have to pay the price for being an asshole. But it does give us an ability through our faith that a lot of other people are striving for. Now, in comparison, in Judaism, the acts of the man are what determines his value or his redemption, similar to the concept of dharma and karma. And while we don't have a second try, a reincarnate concept, I don't doubt that people can. I believe in something called the Guff. It's an older Christian concept, very ancient Christian concept, that we are like, if you think of God as being a big dough ball, and cookies are made out of the dough ball, we're literally like peeled off from parts of God. And in this Guff, this well of souls, we return to that if our spirit is impure, to be to be sent back again to try to straighten our shit out. Now, that's contrary to modern Christian beliefs. It's contrary to Western Christianity, but it was a common concept in the Essene and in the early Christian church, that not necessarily reincarnation. You don't come back as the same person, but you can come back and have attributes like the Buddhists have the Dalai Lama, right? And if you read about how the Dalai Lama is chosen, he actually has the attributes of the previous Dalai Lama. Well, that isn't contrary to my faith. But as far as Christ being a redeemer, I do see that. I do see him as being a redeemer. And not just for Christians. I believe he can be a redeemer for other faiths as well.
Oh, yeah, agreed there because, I mean, something I learned from Jim Self, he was an interesting teacher, said that the creator created creator gods to go create more because the creator wanted to know himself in different aspects. And then the creator gods started creating things in their own image as opposed to the image of God. And that's
You
what
know,
took us kind of
it's
in a
so funny
negative
that you bring that
spiral.
up because I just mentioned that today in the Gnostic texts, which were they were extra canon teachings of the Essene. There's the part of the story of Genesis that talks about the Arconen or the Archons that created man as a golem. In other words, a lifeless being that was brought to life by using the name of God, and that he was tasked with naming the creatures of the earth and seeing what a good job he had done. He was breathed in a Holy Spirit and a living soul. Um, this also goes to the teachings of Zachariah Sitchin with the Adama and Enlil and Enki, and it also goes to the concept that um, we are divine in that we have this image of God placed into us. Now, in my comprehension of the levels of ascension in Hinduism is that if your karma is pure, or not karma, your dharma is pure, you'll ascend um, through the caste system to become Brahmin, and then from Brahmin you become on pure with God. Is that a accurate comprehension of that?
So the caste system was set up by, it was mostly the British who wanted to take away the religion and education, and they instilled the caste system so they could separate people. And then it's kind of the divide and rule. Everybody knows all that
Yeah.
stuff. But the
No, I was
real,
speaking of
what,
what are they, Brahmin?
right.
They're,
So,
yeah.
okay. So by cultural setup, I'm a Brahmin, right? But the actual concept of Brahman is somebody who's actually has the higher level of awareness. So you could have somebody who can be a gardener but can be a Brahman, right? But the cultural context has changed, and people think that it's like it's an attribute of which family you're born into as opposed to your consciousness. But it actually it follows, if you're a person who has a high level of consciousness, then you're a Brahmin. That's how it's supposed to be. But right now it's kind of taken down to the level of, oh, I was born into a priest family, so I'm a Brahmin. So it's kind of a watered down version, but it's a bad version right now.
Yeah,
Because
Judaism has a similar concept in they call them Kohanim, and they have a whole blood test and um, their feet can never touch the ground. There's all kind of ritualistic tradition to Kohanim to become priests of the temples. So yeah, that's kind of similar to what I'm comprehending about the Brahmin too, right?
yes, kind of. But in India, the priesthood has a whole kind of a learning path, and you have to go to certain areas. If like there are certain areas, and you need to find your teacher, and you kind of study with them. It's kind of going to boarding school for a long time. Those are the big priests, right? And then some of them are awakened, and they have their own path and whatnot. And that brings up my next question, which is, like people talk about all of this crazy shit that's going down, right? So many years ago, I'd heard that when I came to the United States, I'd never heard that growing up in Kenya, was that the world's oldest profession is a prostitute, right? The prostitute is the world's oldest profession. Nobody really questioned that, but I think the world's oldest profession is a priest. Do you agree with me?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think a teacher would probably be the oldest profession, or
Yes,
perhaps a
yes, something on those
storyteller.
lines.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. The I think it's kind of a gist to say that every culture has had prostitution. Um, it depends on how you grade that. is a woman who marries a rich man prostituting herself because she married a rich man, or is it that she intends to provide for her children outside of love? In in royal families, it's expected that the children marry regardless if there's love. And the French actually came up with a really cool thing. It's kind of bizarre, but it's by today's standards. But in the event that you married and uh, the marriage did not uh, produce children or did not have love, in the case that it would not produce children, then the handmaiden was expected to bear the children of the handmaiden was like the maid of honor, was expected to bear the children of the man. And in the case of if there was no love in the relationship, um, they also brought out the idea of the gigolo, which was a gigolo is actually a pretty nasty thing. They would get a 12 or 13-year-old boy, typically from Italy, because the Italian families were used to Roman slavery, and they would sell their children, and the French would buy them, remove their testicles, and they would service the woman's sexual needs um, for the man, and then the man was allowed to seek love outside of the marriage in the form of a mistress. And following even a Muslim tradition, which is the equal, each wife has an equal standing. Um, the the wife would choose which woman the husband would be able to have as a mistress, and he would keep a separate house with her, and that was called the arrangement. L'arrangement. That's literally what it was called. So, and that aspect of maintaining family lines and maintaining they came up with all kind of crazy methods of keeping family lines pure. Now, our family, there's 5 primary families. Um, uh, we're at least fifth cousins and intermarried. So, we married between 5 families for centuries. So that idea was to keep a bloodline to some type of authority someplace. So it's kind of interesting that the same traditions, I think, blurred across regions around the world. The 18th century concept of isolationism, that nobody talked to each other, I think is nonsense. There's obviously cross pollination all over the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. My next question is, when you're talking about asking for permission, right? My understanding is that when you're asking for permission, what you're doing is that you're asking for permission from the matrix. And what's happening is that you might not have that intention. And you're probably thinking your higher self or your connection to God. But what's happening is that the way things are set up is that it's actually what you're doing is that you're reflecting, you're asking for permission. The matrix is catching it. And the matrix is saying, fuck you. I'm going to get the most out of you and you ain't going to get nothing. And is that the reason? That's my understanding. Do you think that's the reason not to ask for permission? Because sometimes when I question if I should take a certain step, I kind of like meditate on it or kind of look for answers within. I try not to ask for permission outside, but can you, am I assessing things the right way?
Well, if you think of it, authority is an absolute knowledge on a particular subject. Now, our opinion, each individual person's opinion, who could be more authoritative of that opinion than the individual themselves? So when we seek an external permission, we are both negating our own free will and we're negating our authority over our own opinion. And I think that's subversion of free will. I believe that's, I don't think it's a natural tendency of a human to seek permission. I think that is a learned response. Now, if you're familiar with Brownian psychology, the adaptive, you have parent, adult, and child states, and in the child state you have the adaptive child, positive and negative battery. You have little professor, positive and negative battery, and a free child. In our true form, without influence from outside, we exist in the free child. We seek pleasure, avoid pain, and are the authority of our own thoughts and experience. And I think it is from that state that we are most natural. All the rest of it is construct on top of us, all the way up to just short of the maternal and paternal parent, as far as loving your children or caring for your children. Everything else is a construct. So psychologically, I think they've leveraged our need for acceptance, which is a tribal aspect of our humanity. We need to congregate. We need to have friends, approval, accolade, and they've substituted in this false construct, and I've watched this false construct being created, of this idea of permission and popularity, and concession, which was an attribute of the Roman Catholic Church, not confession, but concession, where you could buy tithing to offset some future sin that you would do. So it was possible to actually buy an assisi, which was a forgiveness of sin prior to committing a sin in the Catholic Church, and it was a money-making thing during the Medici period of the Catholic Church. Now, that's come forward through Western civilization as a permissive system. Now, in Middle Eastern, Indian, and Asian societies, they're heavily paternal. You have the idea of the father being the head of household, or the mother being the head of household. In the case of some, like Rajasthan, has a lot of female head of household. You have this situation where the best interest of the group or the tribe is to have a common goal or a common authority. Now, in recent times, and I'm talking since 1978 forward, the concept of having permission has become dominant. And that permissive state that we seek is sort of a validation. It's pursuit of accolade. And it's not a natural state for us. Now, I've gotten to experience a crap load of stuff in my life, and I can say that was due to the fact that I just did it. I didn't look to see, what do I need, who do I ask what to do, or you just do it. And I think that's our natural state.
Yep, I agree there. And I've seen people be their best selves when they're in that state. Even at work, when we're doing really stressful projects, when I talk to them and I'm like, just do the best that you can. Don't worry about what others are going to think about it, what I'm going to think about it. If anything happens, we'll fix it. And then people come out with some amazing ideas. It's really pretty amazing. And so that's one of the concepts I bring to my workplace, is that it's like I create a little tribe, so it's like, don't ever think that you have to cover your own ass, because you're never going to put up for to be how do you say it? You're not gonna be up for punishment, is kind of the way I don't really say it explicitly that way, but you can't do it wrong. We might not, but the outcome will
David Kawasaki wrote, it's either Rules for Radicals or Rules for Revolutionaries. The opening of the book is first page, first chapter, don't worry, be crappy, but churn, 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 right? So don't worry if you're going to mess up. Just fix your mess up. And that's the
Yep.
way. That's the way to lead our lives. Don't look for permission. Just do it. If you mess it up, fix it.
Reminds
typically
me
the
of just to interject there for a moment. Reminds me of there's a speech that Christopher Walken gives about mice that fall into a bucket of cream, and the mice that don't struggle drown, and the mice that struggle turn the milk into cream, and they can get out of the bucket. It's worth trying.
Hey, uh, if I stacked my disappointments, I'd reach the moon. It's it's like I'm broke now because of all the the shit that I tried and didn't succeed at. But that's you take a look like what Trump went broke like 4 or 5 times. Had to claim bankruptcy and all. But that's just the nature of. Lady at the bank once said that she goes, "So you're a serial entrepreneur?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just trying to get shit done."
Thank you, Amy. Was there anything else you'd like to add?
no, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Raven, you're here. Are you there, Raven?
Oh, yep, I'm here.
Raven, what's
hear
up, bud?
Hey, not much. Just listening to this awesome chat. Yeah. When when I first shared that little bit of the article I'm written, and it was the title of that article is "The Mirror," and it basically touches on the reflective nature of reality. And then it's just funny to hear Nimi talking about the reflective nature of reality, and Dave following up talking about the conditioning, like our mental conditioning that we go through in life. And after I shared that, Psyche was her username. She came on and was talking about the concerns of automated systems and AI. Well, the second part of my article is the Black Mirror, and it deals with that whole concept. I don't know, just funny the synchronicities again. Basically, in summary, that in God is all encompassing.
Yeah, God is all encompassing, and it's
I
when
feel, and I think
anybody
that has to do with how everything is reflective of everything else. Is that
yeah
we're
when
all made of the
anybody
same
ever gives me
underlying
a compliment, I
substrate,
say
and
glory to God. It's um, where are you publishing?
I have no idea right now. It's just some guy named Luke that met online, and he just kind of liked my perspective. And he just recently, the end of last year, got into creating content for websites and then pushing out the content with email lists and stuff. And then I don't know, just trying to build followings on different, building his own platforms basically. And so I just see it as kind of an opportunity to have a platform, and he's going to make me my own site, I think, actually. So once that all gets up and running, probably in spring, I'll share that. But basically, uh, and
Hey, let's
I
grab.
was talking
I think
in
Nimi wants
summary,
to. I think Nimi wants to interject with Raven there. I think she's
just that the
got something.
mind can
Up go. Go ahead, Amy.
No, I think it's kind of relevant here because what this
base.
whole thing with the Black Mirror. Sorry, is it okay to talk?
Yep. Oh yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
So I was just thinking the other day, when we're talking right now, even in the health arena, there is a lot of there's a lot of talk about like people going through different levels of inflammation in their body. And I was wondering if they're putting out these frequencies that are bouncing between these literally mirrors, and then we're catching it. And so we're catching these discordant frequencies. And that's why the inflammation in the body is increasing and people are feeling a little bit a lot out of sorts. I was wondering too if Dave and Raven could talk to that.
Yeah, so actually that's kind of where it kind of goes, is that yeah, everything is being broadcast out, or it's advertised to people. And basically what an advertisement is, and this goes into, Davis talks about our vulnerabilities in terms of wanting validation, and then also our vulnerability of the fear and how that influences us. And that's basically used in advertisement or this broadcasting. And primarily our perception of value is targeted, because if our perception of what's valuable to us and in general is distorted, then we'll consent to these self-destructive exchanges or these non-profitable, unbeneficial exchange. And so a lifestyle is being broadcast out that's self-destructive, and people are receiving that, and then they're reflecting that out, projecting it out in their own decisions and actions. And so I guess the solution would be to generate or practice that self-control, get that mindful state of being and discerning, and using discernment, and then you become sort of the light that guides. And you basically, I guess you set off that resonance and ripple that sparks the light in those around you. Um, so yeah, so basically, it was just metaphorical expression. We've seen it all as a computer automated, because that's the other thing. When people subscribe to that narrative, that broadcast advertisement, they become automated. You get possessed by these external inputs to your operating system, and you get literally possessed, and your free will becomes
Hey,
this
Raven, have you seen the
automated,
movie
confined
Tomorrowland?
set of.
Hey, Raven, have you seen the movie Tomorrowland?
Yeah, I think I have. I'm not
Not the concert movie, but
100% sure. If I have, it's been a long time.
You mean the
I'll
Clooney
DM
movie, right?
with a link to it. I'm sorry, say again?
The George Clooney movie that was out about a year or two ago.
Yeah, it's been a couple years, but yeah, it's excellent, uplifting movie, and I'm listening to what Raven's explaining, and it sounds like the subplot in the thing with the machine people in the other dimension that are broadcasting all the doom and gloom into the world.
That sounds pretty interesting. I'll definitely check that out. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say, really. Was that. Then also, maybe a future subject. I really wanted to try to build a chronological timeline and like kind of push the boundary of like what is our immediate past, and really the past, I guess, mapping the past and trying to figure out when these disasters happen, like what time, what history we're really living in right now. But yeah, I don't know. So just some random ideas thrown out there.
Yeah, I think as we start to emerge, uh, our roles will actually become like crystal clear to us, and for anyone who wants to actually have a an experience, you don't need to use the drugs. The drugs are in your own brain. They're there. Um, the drugs are kind of a shitty shortcut to get there, and yeah, I'll probably piss off everybody from the quantum group because a lot of guys do the microdosing and everything there. Nootropics, I can understand, but heroic dosing to get to hyperspace or hyperconsciousness, um, I don't advise it. Just by syncing up, you can get there, and if you entrain yourself enough, um, you can actually do it without the external stimuli. You can the Tibetan monks and actually some of the gurus What's the is it the big festival by the Ganges? Is it Diwali? That's the big one, or the one where all the gurus and the monks come? Nimi?
No, it will come to me. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's like thousands of holy men come for this festival, and you know they can sync up like automatically. They have extraordinary abilities, and you know that's an aspect of their becoming not necessarily enlightened, but I call it in sync. You know, it's coming into harmony with the sound of creation.
It's called the Kumbh Mela. Did you
If you ever get to see any videos of it,
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Raven. And then to round out the night, Psyche, you had your hand up there. Would you like to be our final question?
No, you know what? I'm like my brain is on overload. I have a million questions, so I'll get on the next one.
All right. Well, Dave, I think that's the night for us.
Well, for everybody, God bless, and all glory to God. And um, may our talk tonight actually, in some way, improve your life, improve the circumstance that you live. And we're having another one tomorrow night. So, anyone wants to come on back, we can come on back tomorrow night.
Yep. So thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. We will have a copy of the conversation posted to the group once Telegram sends it to me. But again, thank you, everybody, for your contribution. Have a great night, and God bless.